At the checkout counter, my mom asked, "Where's your VIP card? Why pay in cash?" I froze completely. The question wasn't about shopping preferences, it was about the trust fund she'd been secretly managing for 15 years. The fund my grandmother left specifically for my education and future. Standing there with groceries in my hands, I realized my mother had been living off money that was never hers. The woman who raised me to value honesty had been stealing from me my entire adult life. Before we dive into this unbelievable family betrayal story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. If stories about family drama and ultimate justice get your heart racing, like mine do, smash that like button and hit subscribe because this tale of discovery and revenge will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about family loyalty. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this unfolds. My name is Serafina, and that moment at the grocery store changed everything I thought I knew about my life. I'm 28 years old, working two jobs to pay off student loans that should never have existed. For years, I'd wondered why my grandmother's promised inheritance never materialized after her death when I was 13. The VIP card incident happened on a Tuesday evening. Mom and I were shopping for dinner ingredients when the cashier mentioned their rewards program. That's when she made that fateful comment about my VIP card and paying cash. Her face went pale when she realized what she'd said. The confusion in my expression must have been obvious because she immediately started backtracking, claiming she meant something else entirely. That night, I couldn't sleep. Something about her reaction felt wrong. The next morning, I called my Aunt Margaret, my grandmother's youngest daughter, who'd always been the family record keeper. What she told me shattered my world completely. "Serafina, honey," Aunt Margaret said carefully, "your grandmother left you a substantial trust fund, $50,000 for college plus additional funds that were supposed to grow with interest until you turned 25. Your mother was named as the trustee until you came of age." My hands trembled as I held the phone. "What do you mean, supposed to grow? I never received anything." Mom told me grandmother left everything to charity. The silence on the other end spoke volumes. "Oh, sweetie, we need to talk. Can you come over this weekend?" That Saturday, Aunt Margaret spread documents across her kitchen table. Bank statements, legal papers, and investment records painted a devastating picture. The trust fund had indeed been established with $68,000 initially. By the time I turned 25 last year, it should have grown to nearly $90,000 with proper management. Instead, the account showed a pattern of systematic withdrawals starting just months after grandmother's funeral. 500 here, 1,000, they're always with my mother's signature as trustee. The justifications on the withdrawal slips were creative. Educational expenses for beneficiary, medical costs for beneficiary, housing assistance for beneficiary's future. None of these expenses had ever reached me. While my mother claimed these disbursements, I was working at a coffee shop during high school, taking out student loans for community college, and later transferring to a state university with even more debt. I'd been living paycheck to paycheck, believing I had to struggle because my family couldn't afford to help. The most infuriating discovery was a series of withdrawals labeled "Investment in Beneficiary's Future Business Venture." $22,000 had been withdrawn over 8 months supposedly for a startup I was allegedly planning. I'd never expressed interest in starting a business, and certainly never received funds for one. Aunt Margaret pulled out another folder. "I've been keeping track because something felt off. Your mother bought a new car 3 years ago, paid in cash. She renovated her kitchen last year, also cash. She's been taking expensive vacations, claiming they're well-deserved breaks from caring for Serafina's affairs." The cruelest part was the timing. Every major withdrawal coincided with moments when I desperately needed financial help. When my car broke down during college, requiring me to drop a semester to work full-time for repairs, she'd withdrawn $3,000 that same week for beneficiary transportation needs. When I'd asked her for help with rent during a particularly difficult period, she'd lectured me about financial responsibility while having just taken $4,000 from my inheritance for beneficiary housing stabilization. Looking at the final balance, I felt physically sick. $1,200 remained of my grandmother's generous gift. $1,200 from what should have been nearly 90,000. My mother had stolen my future, my education fund, my security blanket, all while watching me struggle and offering nothing but criticism about my financial choices. The manipulation ran deeper than just theft. She'd actively discouraged me from pursuing better opportunities, claiming they were too risky or not practical. When I'd considered transferring to a better university, she'd worried about the debt. When I'd wanted to take unpaid internships that could have led to better careers, she'd insisted I needed to keep working hourly jobs. She'd kept me small, kept me struggling, all while funding her comfortable lifestyle with money meant to lift me up. Aunt Margaret handed me copies of everything. I debated telling you for years, but I kept hoping she'd do the right thing. When you mentioned still paying student loans last month, I realized she never intended to come clean. The betrayal cut deeper than simple theft. This was my mother, the woman who'd raised me alone after my father left, who'd taught me right from wrong, who'd been my role model for strength and integrity. She'd looked me in the eye countless times while I worried about money, while I worked exhausting double shifts, while I made sacrifices to survive financially. She'd offered sympathy and advice, all while living comfortably off funds designated for my future. The most devastating realization was how this theft had shaped my entire adult life. Without access to my inheritance, I'd made educational choices based on financial limitations rather than potential. I'd chosen cheaper schools, avoided opportunities, and limited my dreams to what seemed financially feasible for someone from my background. My mother hadn't just stolen money, she'd stolen possibilities, opportunities, and years of my life spent struggling unnecessarily. That evening, I sat in my tiny apartment surrounded by evidence of her betrayal. Bills. I shouldn't have debt that could have been avoided, a life made smaller by someone who claimed to love me most. The woman who taught me that family always comes first had put herself first at every turn. The person who'd preached about honesty and integrity had been lying to my face for 15 years. I realized I had a choice to make. I could confront her privately, hope for an apology and repayment plan, and try to preserve our relationship. Or I could seek real justice for this betrayal. Looking at those bank statements, seeing the systematic theft disguised as care, I knew which path I had to choose. Monday morning, I called in sick to work and drove straight to the offices of Hartwell and Associates, the law firm that had handled my grandmother's estate. Attorney James Hartwell, now in his 60s with silver hair and kind eyes, remembered both my grandmother and the trust fund clearly. "Miss Serafina," he said, after reviewing the documents I'd brought, "what you've shown me constitutes clear breach of fiduciary duty and embezzlement. As trustee, your mother had a legal obligation to manage these funds solely for your benefit." His expression grew more serious as he examined each withdrawal record. "These false justifications on the withdrawal slips could constitute fraud. She's systematically documented fictional expenses to justify personal use of trust funds. This isn't a simple mistake or poor judgment. This is deliberate, premeditated theft." Mr. Hartwell explained my options. I could pursue civil litigation to recover the stolen funds plus interest and damages. More significantly, because she'd used falsified documentation to access the money, criminal charges were possible. The evidence was overwhelming, and the paper trail clear. However, he cautioned, pursuing criminal charges against a family member carries emotional and social consequences beyond the legal ones. You need to be prepared for that reality. I thought about all the times I'd eaten ramen for weeks to make rent, all the opportunities I'd passed up due to financial constraints, all the stress and worry that had shaped my 20s. Mr. Hartwell, she watched me struggle for years while spending money that was meant to prevent exactly that struggle. She made a conscious choice every single day to let me suffer while she benefited. I want full justice. That afternoon, I drove to my mother's house for what she believed was our regular weekly dinner. She greeted me with her usual warmth, asking about work and offering to help with groceries I clearly couldn't afford. The irony was suffocating. Over pot roast she'd likely purchased with my stolen inheritance money, I placed photocopies of the bank statements on the table. Her fork clattered against her plate as the color drained from her face. Serafina, I can explain everything, she began, but I held up my hand. Explain how you've stolen nearly $80,000 from me over 15 years. Explain how you falsified documentation to justify personal purchases. Explain how you watched me struggle financially while you lived comfortably off money. My grandmother left specifically for my future. Her initial strategy was deflection and minimization. She claimed she'd borrowed the money temporarily, always intending to pay it back. She insisted she'd used some funds for legitimate expenses. I couldn't remember gaslighting me about my own financial history. She argued she'd deserved compensation for managing the trust, despite never mentioning such an arrangement existed. When those tactics failed, she switched to emotional manipulation. She reminded me of all the sacrifices she'd made as a single mother, claiming the money was partial repayment for 18 years of unpaid maternal labor. She suggested I was being ungrateful and greedy, focusing on money instead of the love and care she'd provided. I gave you everything, she said, tears forming in her eyes. I raised you alone, worked multiple jobs, sacrificed my own dreams for your future, and now you're treating me like a criminal over some paperwork errors. Paperwork errors? I stood up, anger flooding through me. You systematically stole from your own daughter for 15 years. You falsified documents, lied about expenses, and watched me struggle while you benefited from my inheritance. You didn't make mistakes, Mom. You made choices, deliberate, selfish choices that prioritized your comfort over my future. The mask finally slipped completely. Her tears dried up and her voice turned cold. You have no idea how hard it was raising you alone. Your father left me with nothing but debt and responsibility. I earned every penny of that money through years of sacrifice. You wouldn't even exist without my choices and my work. There it was. The truth beneath 15 years of lies. She genuinely believed she was entitled to my inheritance because of her role as my mother. In her mind, my grandmother's gift to me was actually payment owed to her for parental services rendered. That money was never yours, I said quietly. Grandmother left it specifically for my education and future because she wanted to give me opportunities you couldn't provide. She trusted you to protect those opportunities, not to steal them for yourself. I pulled out the legal papers Mr. Hartwell had prepared. I've filed a civil lawsuit to recover the stolen funds plus interest and damages. I've also provided all evidence to the district attorney's office for potential criminal prosecution. You have committed embezzlement and fraud, and I intend to pursue full legal consequences. Her reaction was swift and vicious. She accused me of being vindictive and ungrateful. She threatened to cut me out of her will as if I'd ever expect to inherit anything after this betrayal. She claimed the stress of legal action would ruin her health and reputation, guilting me for prioritizing justice over family harmony. Everyone will know what kind of daughter you are, she spat. They'll see you're the type of person who destroys her own mother over money. You'll be alone, Serafina. No one will trust someone who treats family like this. But her threats only strengthened my resolve. She was still manipulating, still trying to control the narrative, still refusing to accept responsibility for her actions. Even caught red-handed with overwhelming evidence, she couldn't admit wrongdoing or show genuine remorse. I left her house that evening knowing our relationship was forever changed, but feeling lighter than I had in years. The gaslighting had ended. The lies were exposed. The woman who'd taught me to value honesty above all else had revealed her true character, and I was finally free to respond accordingly. The next morning, I received a call from Detective Maria Santos with the Financial Crimes Unit. The district attorney's office was interested in pursuing criminal charges based on the evidence I'd provided. The systematic nature of the theft, the falsified documentation, and the substantial amount involved made this a clear case of felony embezzlement. Miss Serafina, Detective Santos explained. Cases like this often involve family members who feel entitled to funds they're supposed to manage. The law is clear: trustee duties are sacred, and violation of those duties carries serious consequences regardless of family relationships. Within days, word began spreading through our extended family and social circle. Some relatives expressed shock and disappointment in my mother's actions. Others questioned my decision to pursue legal action against family. The division was swift and telling. Those who supported accountability and justice stood with me. Those who prioritized family loyalty over personal integrity defended her. I realized this legal battle would reveal not just my mother's true character, but the values and priorities of everyone around us. It was a test that would separate allies from enablers, supporters from people who valued comfortable lies over difficult truths. The community response to news of the legal proceedings revealed fractures I'd never noticed in my family structure. Within a week of filing charges, battle lines were drawn that split our extended family down the middle. Aunt Margaret became my strongest supporter, providing additional documentation and serving as a character witness. She revealed that she'd suspected financial impropriety for years, but had hoped my mother would eventually do the right thing. Your grandmother specifically chose your mother as trustee because she trusted her integrity, Aunt Margaret told me. She's probably rolling in her grave knowing how that trust was betrayed. My cousin Jake, Aunt Margaret's son and a financial advisor, offered to help analyze the investment losses caused by my mother's theft. His calculations were devastating. With proper investment management, my inheritance should have grown to over $110,000 by now. The opportunity cost of my mother's theft exceeded $40,000 in lost growth alone. Serafina, this isn't just about the money she took, Jake explained as we reviewed investment projections. It's about the compound growth you lost, the opportunities you missed, the debt you accumulated because you didn't have access to funds that were legally yours. She didn't just steal your past, she stole your future. Uncle Robert, my mother's older brother, initially tried playing peacemaker. He suggested family mediation, private repayment plans, anything to avoid public legal proceedings. But when I showed him the evidence, his perspective shifted dramatically. I helped your grandmother set up that trust, he admitted. She was so excited about giving you a head start in life. She made me promise to watch out for you if anything happened to her. I failed in that promise, but I won't fail now. Uncle Robert's support proved crucial because he was a respected businessman in our community. His public backing gave my case credibility with family members who might otherwise have dismissed it as a misunderstanding or overreaction. My grandmother's best friend, Mrs. Eleanor Dawson, emerged as an unexpected ally. At 75, she was sharp as a tack and furious about the betrayal of her deceased friend's wishes. Your grandmother saved for years to leave you that money, Mrs. Dawson told me during one of our coffee meetings. She worked extra shifts at the hospital, denied herself luxuries, all so you could have opportunities she never had. She'd be heartbroken knowing her own daughter stole her gift to you. Mrs. Dawson had maintained detailed records of conversations with my grandmother about the trust fund. She provided sworn statements about my grandmother's specific intentions and her concerns about ensuring the money was properly managed. The most surprising ally came from an unexpected source, my mother's coworker and supposed friend, Linda Morrison. Linda worked with my mother at the insurance office and had grown uncomfortable with my mother's lifestyle improvements over the past few years. I always wondered how she afforded that new car and the kitchen renovation on our salary, Linda confided during a phone call. When she said she was managing money for you, I assumed she was helping you invest, not spending it herself. She used to complain about your financial struggles while showing off new purchases. It never added up. Linda agreed to provide testimony about my mother's spending patterns and statements she'd made about the trust fund management. Her insider perspective would be valuable in court because she could testify to my mother's awareness of my financial difficulties while simultaneously benefiting from stolen funds. However, not everyone supported my pursuit of justice. The opposition was swift and harsh, led by my mother's sister, Aunt Patricia, who viewed family loyalty as paramount regardless of wrongdoing. You're destroying this family over money, Aunt Patricia accused during a heated phone call. Your mother raised you alone, sacrificed everything for you, and this is how you repay her, by dragging her through legal hell. Aunt Patricia organized a campaign of family pressure designed to make me drop the charges. She convinced several cousins that I was being vindictive and greedy, caring more about money than family relationships. She spread narratives about ungrateful children and the importance of forgiveness, conveniently ignoring the systematic nature of my mother's theft. My mother's book club friends rallied around her, painting her as a victim of an ungrateful daughter's greed. They organized meal trains and support networks, treating her like she was suffering from an illness rather than facing consequences for criminal behavior. The most painful opposition came from my godfather, Uncle Tommy, who'd been like a second father to me growing up. He believed family problems should be handled privately and couldn't understand why I'd involve law enforcement in what he saw as a family financial dispute. Serafina, honey, I know you're hurt, but think about what you're doing, he pleaded during an emotional conversation. Your mother made mistakes, but she loves you. This legal action will destroy her reputation. Her job maybe even send her to jail. Is money really worth destroying the woman who raised you? These confrontations forced me to articulate my position clearly and repeatedly. This wasn't about money. It was about justice, accountability, and the principle that family relationships don't exempt people from consequences for serious crimes. My mother hadn't made mistakes. She'd made deliberate choices to prioritize her comfort over my future for 15 years. The community division extended beyond family to former friends and neighbors. Some people avoided me entirely, uncomfortable with the drama and unwilling to take sides. Others expressed support privately, but refused to do so publicly, fearing social backlash from my mother's supporters. Local business owners who knew both of us struggled with the situation. My mother banked at the community credit union for 20 years and was friendly with the staff. When news of the embezzlement charges spread, several employees expressed shock and disappointment, but also sympathy for her position as a single mother. The social pressure was intense and exhausting. Every grocery store trip, every public outing became an exercise in navigating awkward encounters with people who'd heard various versions of our family drama. Some offered support. Others made their disapproval clear through cold shoulders and whispered conversations. Detective Santos warned me that family financial crime cases often create exactly this type of community division. People have a hard time believing family members could systematically steal from each other, she explained. They want to believe it's a misunderstanding or that family love should overcome legal consequences. But the detective also reassured me about the strength of our case. The evidence is overwhelming. The falsified documentation alone proves intent to defraud. This isn't a gray area situation. It's clear-cut embezzlement with extensive paper trails. My attorney, Mr. Hartwell, helped me prepare for the social aspects of pursuing justice. High-profile family cases always generate community interest and divided opinions, he counseled. You need to be prepared for people to question your motives, your character, and your decision-making. But remember, seeking legal justice for criminal behavior is never wrong, regardless of family relationships. As weeks passed, the alliance-building phase revealed important truths about the people in my life. Those who supported accountability and justice, even when it was difficult and socially uncomfortable, proved themselves trustworthy. Those who prioritized maintaining pleasant social dynamics over addressing serious wrongdoing showed their true values. I realized that pursuing justice would cost me some relationships, but it would also strengthen others and help me identify who deserved a place in my future. The people standing with me during this difficult time were the ones who truly understood integrity, accountability, and real love that demands honesty and personal responsibility, rather than enabling harmful behavior. The support network I was building would prove crucial in the coming weeks, because I had no idea that one of my most trusted allies was about to betray me in the most devastating way possible. The foundation I thought was solid was about to crack in ways I never could have anticipated. 3 weeks before our court date, I discovered that my strongest ally had been working against me from the beginning. The betrayal came from the person I'd trusted most, Aunt Margaret. It started with a phone call from Detective Santos that made my blood run cold. Serafina, we need to meet immediately. There's been a development in your case that you need to know about. At the police station, Detective Santos spread new documents across the table. Bank records, phone logs, and recorded conversations painted a picture that shattered everything I believed about my support system. Your Aunt Margaret has been in regular contact with your mother throughout this entire process, Detective Santos explained grimly. She's been feeding her information about our investigation, your legal strategy, and the evidence we've gathered. The recorded phone conversations were devastating. In them, I could hear Aunt Margaret's voice clearly. Don't worry, honey. I'm keeping track of everything Serafina tells me. That lawyer doesn't know about the safety deposit box, and I made sure she doesn't have access to the original trust documents with your mother's signature. My hands trembled as I listened to weeks of strategic discussions between my mother and the woman I'd believed was my champion. Aunt Margaret hadn't been helping me seek justice. She'd been running a counterintelligence operation to protect my mother from the consequences of her crimes. There's more, Detective Santos continued. We believe Aunt Margaret may have been complicit in the original embezzlement. Financial records show she received several large cash deposits over the past 5 years that coincide with major withdrawals from your trust fund. The evidence was overwhelming. Aunt Margaret had received over $18,000 in cash payments from my mother, disguised as birthday gifts, holiday bonuses, and family emergency assistance. In reality, she'd been receiving kickbacks for helping facilitate and cover up the theft of my inheritance. Even worse, Aunt Margaret had been actively sabotaging my case. She'd convinced several potential witnesses to change their testimony, claiming I was being vindictive and that family harmony was more important than legal action. She'd reached out to Mrs. Eleanor Dawson, my grandmother's best friend, and persuaded her to soften her sworn statement about my grandmother's intentions. She told Mrs. Dawson that pursuing criminal charges would devastate the entire family and that your grandmother would have wanted forgiveness over justice, Detective Santos explained. Mrs. Dawson is now questioning whether she should testify at all. The manipulation ran deeper than just witness tampering. Aunt Margaret had been feeding my mother detailed information about our legal strategy, allowing her defense attorney to prepare counterarguments for every piece of evidence we planned to present. She knew about the investment analysis Jake had prepared, the timeline Detective Santos had constructed, and the character witnesses we'd lined up. Most devastatingly, Aunt Margaret had been working to turn other family members against me. The recorded conversations revealed her coaching my mother on how to frame the narrative as a greedy daughter, destroying her loving mother over money. She'd orchestrated the family pressure campaign, convinced Uncle Tommy to intervene, and encouraged Aunt Patricia's vocal opposition. Your aunt has been playing both sides from the beginning, Detective Santos said. She positioned herself as your ally to gain access to information, then used that information to help your mother avoid accountability. The personal betrayal cut deeper than my mother's original theft. I'd confided in Aunt Margaret about my pain, my financial struggles, and my determination to seek justice. I'd trusted her with my vulnerabilities and my hopes for recovery. She'd listened sympathetically, offered comfort and support, all while secretly working to ensure my mother escaped consequences. Sitting in that police station, I realized how naive I'd been. I'd assumed that presenting evidence of my mother's crimes would automatically generate family support for accountability. Instead, it had triggered a sophisticated campaign to protect the criminal and discredit the victim. Aunt Margaret's betrayal wasn't spontaneous or emotional. It was calculated and strategic. The recordings revealed the extent of their coordination. They'd planned responses to each piece of evidence, developed alternative explanations for suspicious financial transactions, and identified weaknesses in witness testimony. They'd turned my pursuit of justice into a family war with sides chosen based on loyalty rather than truth. We have enough evidence to charge your aunt as an accessory after the fact and for obstruction of justice, Detective Santos informed me. Her attempts to tamper with witnesses and interfere with the investigation constitute serious crimes. But the damage to my case was significant. Several witnesses were now reluctant to testify, having been convinced by Aunt Margaret that doing so would destroy family relationships. The element of surprise was gone, giving my mother's defense team time to prepare comprehensive counter-arguments. My mother had been able to hide additional assets and evidence because she knew exactly what investigators were seeking. Most painfully, I realized that my emotional support system had been compromised from the beginning. Every conversation with Aunt Margaret about my feelings, my struggles with the betrayal, and my determination to seek justice had been reported back to my mother. My vulnerability had been weaponized against me. That evening, I called Aunt Margaret to confront her about the evidence. Her response was chilling in its calculation and lack of remorse. "Serafina, you're destroying this family," she said coldly. "Your mother is my sister. Blood is thicker than water, and family protects family. You may be technically right about the money, but you're morally wrong about how you're handling it." When I mentioned the kickback payments she'd received, she didn't deny them. Instead, she justified them as compensation for the emotional labor of managing family crisis and supporting her sister through difficult times. "Your mother needed help dealing with the stress you've caused," Aunt Margaret explained without shame. "Those payments were for counseling support, family mediation services, and the time I spent trying to talk sense into you. You've put the entire family through hell with your vindictive legal action." Even caught red-handed in criminal conspiracy, she maintained that I was the problem. In her worldview, my pursuit of justice for systematic theft was a greater moral failing than the theft itself or her cover-up efforts. The betrayal forced me to reevaluate everything I thought I knew about family loyalty and support. I'd learned that some people view family relationships as protection from consequences rather than motivation for better behavior. For them, blood relations created obligations to enable and cover up wrongdoing rather than encourage accountability and growth. Lying in bed that night, I felt more alone than ever. My mother had stolen my inheritance and my trust. My aunt had stolen my confidence and my faith in family support. The two women I'd most relied on for emotional and practical guidance had both prioritized protecting criminal behavior over supporting the victim of that behavior. But in the darkness, I found something unexpected: clarity. The betrayals had stripped away illusions about family loyalty and revealed people's true characters. I no longer had to wonder who deserved my trust or my future emotional investment. The path forward might be lonelier, but it would be built on truth rather than comfortable lies. Detective Santos had promised that Aunt Margaret's betrayal wouldn't destroy our case. New evidence was emerging, and unexpected allies were stepping forward. Justice was still possible, but it would require rebuilding my support system with people who valued integrity over family politics. The morning after discovering Aunt Margaret's betrayal, I received an unexpected phone call that would change everything. The caller was someone I'd never met, but who would become instrumental in ensuring justice prevailed. "Miss Serafina, this is Rebecca Walsh from First National Bank's Fraud Investigation Department. I've been following your case in the news, and I believe I have information that could be crucial to your legal proceedings." Rebecca explained that she'd been investigating a pattern of suspicious trust fund withdrawals across multiple accounts at their institution. My mother's systematic theft wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a larger pattern of trustee abuse that the bank had been tracking internally. "Your mother's account triggered multiple red flags over the years," Rebecca continued. "The frequency of withdrawals, the vague justifications, and the lack of beneficiary contact were all concerning. Unfortunately, our internal protocols at the time weren't strong enough to require intervention." But Rebecca had documented everything. She'd maintained detailed files on questionable trustee behavior, hoping that stronger regulations would eventually be implemented. When news of my case broke, she realized her documentation could provide crucial evidence. "I have records of internal discussions about your mother's account dating back 7 years," she explained. "Multiple bank employees expressed concerns about the withdrawal pattern and the fact that we never had direct contact with you as the beneficiary." The bank records Rebecca provided were devastating to my mother's defense. They showed that bank employees had repeatedly flagged her account for suspicious activity. Internal emails discussed whether to require additional documentation or beneficiary contact for large withdrawals. One email specifically stated, "Account holder appears to be using trust funds for personal expenses rather than beneficiary needs." More importantly, the bank records revealed that my mother had been questioned about her withdrawal patterns on 3 separate occasions. Each time, she'd provided increasingly elaborate explanations about my supposed business ventures, educational expenses, and medical needs. The bank had documented these conversations, creating a paper trail that proved her intent to deceive. "Your mother told us you were pursuing an expensive graduate degree in California," Rebecca explained. "She claimed the money was for tuition, living expenses, and research costs. When we suggested contacting you directly to confirm these expenses, she insisted it would interfere with your studies and stress you unnecessarily." The bank's documentation proved that my mother's theft wasn't impulsive or emotional. It was premeditated fraud involving elaborate deception of financial institutions. She'd constructed detailed fictional narratives about my life and expenses to justify systematic embezzlement. Detective Santos was thrilled with this new evidence. "Bank fraud adds federal charges to your mother's case," she explained. "The documented lies to financial institutions prove intent to commit fraud beyond simple embezzlement. This significantly strengthens our prosecution." Rebecca's involvement led to another crucial discovery. During her investigation, she'd identified other victims of trustee abuse. 3 families in our area had experienced similar situations where trusted relatives had embezzled inheritance funds meant for younger family members. "These cases follow predictable patterns," Rebecca explained during our meeting at the bank. "Trusted family members are appointed to manage funds for minors. They start with small withdrawals for legitimate purposes, then gradually increase the amounts and frequency. They create fictional explanations for the spending and actively discourage beneficiaries from investigating the accounts." One of these other victims, Marcus Thompson, reached out to me after learning about my case. Marcus was 32 and had discovered just months earlier that his uncle had stolen $43,000 from his college fund over a decade. "The isolation is the worst part," Marcus told me over coffee. "Family members act like you're overreacting or being vindictive because you won't just accept the theft and move on. They make you feel crazy for expecting accountability." Marcus had decided not to pursue criminal charges against his uncle, hoping to preserve family relationships. But he'd learned that enabling criminal behavior didn't actually preserve anything meaningful. "My uncle never showed remorse or made any effort to repay the stolen money," Marcus explained. "The family members who pressured me to forgive him weren't volunteering to cover his debt. They just wanted me to absorb the loss quietly so everyone else could remain comfortable." Marcus's experience reinforced my determination to pursue full legal consequences. Forgiveness without accountability wasn't healing, it was enabling future victimization. Real family love required holding people responsible for harmful actions, not protecting them from consequences. The most significant new ally emerged from a completely unexpected source: my mother's former employer, Janet Morrison, who was Linda's boss at the insurance office. Janet had been observing my mother's spending patterns and lifestyle improvements with growing concern. "I started paying attention when Linda mentioned your financial struggles during the same period your mother was making expensive purchases," Janet explained. Janet. Something didn't add up about her explanations for her improved finances. Janet had documented concerning conversations where my mother had discussed managing my inheritance while simultaneously complaining about my poor financial decisions. The contradictions had troubled her enough to maintain notes about these discussions. "Your mother told us she was trying to teach you financial responsibility by limiting your access to inheritance money," Janet said. "She claimed you were irresponsible with money and needed to learn the value of work before receiving your grandmother's gift. Meanwhile, she was buying expensive items and taking vacations." Janet's documentation proved that my mother had been deliberately portraying me as financially irresponsible to justify withholding my inheritance while secretly spending that money on herself. She'd constructed a narrative that painted her theft as protective parenting rather than criminal embezzlement. This evidence was particularly powerful because it came from neutral witnesses with no stake in our family drama. Janet and Rebecca were professionals who documented suspicious behavior based on institutional knowledge and experience, not family loyalties or personal relationships. Mr. Hartwell was confident that these new allies and evidence would overcome the damage caused by Aunt Margaret's betrayal. Professional witnesses with documented concerns carry enormous weight with juries, he explained. Their testimony shows that multiple neutral parties recognized problematic behavior independent of family disputes. The new evidence also revealed the broader scope of my mother's deception. She hadn't just stolen from me. She'd systematically lied to financial institutions' employers and community members to cover up her crimes. Her web of deceit extended far beyond our family, affecting people who'd trusted her professional integrity. Rebecca's bank investigation had uncovered additional financial irregularities that suggested my mother might have been involved in other fraudulent activities. Credit applications with inflated income claims, insurance claims for questionable expenses, and tax filings that didn't match her documented spending patterns all painted a picture of someone comfortable with financial deception. "Your case has opened up multiple avenues of investigation," Detective Santos informed me. "Your mother's financial behavior shows patterns consistent with serial fraud, not just isolated embezzlement of your inheritance." As our court date approached, I felt more confident about achieving justice, despite the personal betrayals I'd endured. The truth was emerging through multiple sources documented by professionals who understood financial crime patterns. My mother's elaborate deceptions were unraveling under professional scrutiny. Most importantly, I'd learned to identify trustworthy allies. Rebecca Marcus and Janet had stepped forward based on principles rather than personal relationships. They supported accountability because they understood that financial crimes harm entire communities, not just individual victims. The trial lasted 3 days and ended with complete vindication. The jury deliberated for only 2 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges: embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy. My mother was sentenced to 18 months in prison, 5 years of probation, and full restitution of $96,000, including interest and penalties. Aunt Margaret received 6 months in jail and 2 years of probation for her role in the conspiracy and witness tampering. Both women were ordered to pay additional fines and court costs. The judge's comments during sentencing were particularly satisfying. "The defendants violated the most sacred trust possible family members entrusted with protecting a loved one's future," Judge Harrison stated. "Instead of honoring that responsibility, they systematically stole from someone they claimed to love, then attempted to cover up their crimes through manipulation and deceit." And the judge specifically noted the premeditated nature of their actions and their complete lack of remorse throughout the proceedings. Even when confronted with overwhelming evidence, the defendants continued to blame the victim and justify their criminal behavior. This court sees no evidence of rehabilitation or genuine accountability. The civil lawsuit resulted in additional damages. Beyond the $96,000 in stolen funds and lost interest, I was awarded $47,000 in punitive damages and legal fees. The total judgment of $143,000 would provide the financial security my grandmother had originally intended for me. My mother's house was placed in foreclosure to satisfy the judgment. Her car was repossessed and her bank accounts were frozen. The comfortable lifestyle she'd maintained through stolen money collapsed completely. She filed for bankruptcy, claiming she couldn't afford the restitution payments, but the court rejected her petition because restitution for criminal activity isn't dischargeable. The community response was swift and decisive. My mother lost her job at the insurance company when her criminal conviction became public. Several families who'd trusted her with financial advice and insurance needs demanded account reviews and transferred their business elsewhere. Her reputation in our small community was permanently destroyed. Aunt Margaret faced similar consequences. Her real estate license was suspended pending investigation by the state licensing board. Former clients expressed concerns about her ethics and judgment, leading to multiple complaints and potential additional legal issues. The woman who'd prioritized family loyalty over accountability found herself professionally ruined. The family division became permanent. Uncle Tommy, Aunt Patricia, and several cousins maintained their support for my mother, viewing her imprisonment as excessive punishment for family financial disputes. They blamed me for destroying family relationships and refused to acknowledge the criminal nature of her actions. But this division revealed something important. I didn't want relationships built on enabling criminal behavior and avoiding accountability. The family members who supported justice, truth, and personal responsibility were the ones worth maintaining connections with. Uncle Robert became a genuine mentor and father figure, helping me navigate the investment opportunities my recovered inheritance provided. Jake assisted with financial planning and long-term wealth-building strategies. Mrs. Eleanor Dawson. My grandmother's friend became an adopted grandmother figure who shared stories about my grandmother's hopes and dreams for my future. Rebecca Walsh from the bank became a close friend and professional mentor. Her work in financial fraud prevention inspired me to consider a career change that would allow me to help other victims of financial crimes. She helped me understand that my experience, while painful, had given me unique insight into how these crimes affect victims and families. Marcus Thompson and I developed a strong friendship based on our shared experiences with family financial betrayal. Together, we started a support group for inheritance theft victims, providing resources and emotional support for people navigating similar situations. Many victims face the same family pressure to forgive and forget, and our group helps people understand they deserve accountability and justice. My relationship with Linda Morrison from my mother's former workplace evolved into a genuine friendship. Her courage in providing testimony despite social pressure showed me the value of people who choose truth over comfort. She introduced me to her book club, where I found a community of women who valued integrity and personal growth. The most unexpected blessing was my relationship with Janet Morrison, Linda's boss, who became a professional mentor. She offered me a position at her insurance company, recognizing that my experience with financial crime had given me valuable insights into fraud prevention. The career opportunity provided better income and meaningful work, helping clients protect their assets. 18 months after my mother's conviction, I used part of my recovered inheritance to purchase my first home. Standing in my own kitchen, preparing dinner with ingredients I could afford without stress, I thought about my grandmother's original intentions. She'd wanted to give me opportunities and security, and despite my mother's theft and betrayal, her gift had ultimately achieved its purpose. The stolen years of financial struggle had taught me resilience, careful money management, and the ability to distinguish between needs and wants. My grandmother's delayed gift, combined with hard-earned life skills, positioned me for long-term financial success and emotional growth. I also used part of the inheritance to establish a small trust fund for other victims of family financial crime. Working with Rebecca and Mr. Hartwell, we created resources to help people identify trustee abuse and pursue legal remedies. My painful experience was transformed into assistance for others facing similar betrayals. The most profound change was my understanding of family. Blood relationships don't automatically create trust, loyalty, or love. Real family consists of people who support your growth, demand accountability, and choose truth over comfortable lies. My chosen family of mentors, friends, and supporters provided more genuine care than my biological relatives, who enabled criminal behavior. My mother was released from prison after serving 14 months of her sentence. She attempted to contact me through various relatives, claiming she'd found religion and wanted to make amends. But her letters shared through family members focused on her suffering in prison rather than acknowledging the impact of her crimes on my life. I chose not to respond. Forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation, and accountability doesn't end with serving jail time. Real amends would involve genuine remorse, full acceptance of responsibility, and meaningful efforts to repair the harm caused. Her victim focused communications showed she still didn't understand the impact of her systematic theft and betrayal. Today, 5 years after that grocery store revelation, I live in financial security, with a career I love, surrounded by people who value integrity and growth. My grandmother's gift ultimately provided exactly what she'd intended: opportunities, security, and freedom to make choices based on potential rather than financial limitations. Sometimes justice takes years to achieve, but it's worth the fight. When family members betray fundamental trust, holding them accountable isn't vindictive, it's necessary for healing and growth. The people who support that accountability are the ones who deserve places in your future. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted was secretly working against you? How did you handle family pressure to forgive serious betrayals? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below about times when standing up for yourself meant standing alone, because sometimes that's exactly what justice requires. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life accounts of family drama and ultimate justice. Share this video with anyone who's ever questioned whether they should hold family accountable for serious wrongdoing. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable destructive behavior. Thank you for watching my journey from betrayal to justice. I hope my experience helps you understand that demanding accountability from family isn't cruel, it's necessary. Family love should inspire better behavior, not protect people from consequences of harmful actions. Until next time, remember that you deserve relationships built on truth, respect, and genuine care.